Hi everyone, so today I would like to explain Still in Teaching by Principles book by Douglas Brown in part 1, Foundations for Classroom Practice, and chapter 4, Teaching by Principles. So let's get started. First, about automaticity. Learning music and learning language have much in common, not the least of which is that both require the development of automaticity for successful learning. The principle of automaticity may be summarized as follows. Efficient second language learning involves a timely progression from a control of view language forms to fluid and error-free automatic processing of a relatively unlimited number of language forms. And development of fluency is aided by a primary focus on meaning, purpose, and interaction, and a secondary but optimal amount of attention to language forms. And transfer. The principle of transfer plays a dominant role in learning an additional language. A historical look at uh, a historical look at the research on language learning in the middle of the 20th century reveals an obsession with transfer, especially from the first to the second language, known as interlingual transfer or interference. Some went so far as to claim that any difficulty in learning an L2 could be equated to the differences between a learner's first and second languages. Transfer is an all-encompassing principle that reaches across physical, cognitive, affective, and social cultural domains. Virtually, all learning is the product of transfer. We can define terms simply as the application of knowledge, skill, or emotion acquired in one situation to new situations, and transfer can be positive or negative. And Chim's 2006 demonstrated the importance of a transfer in a number of academic contexts, general language skills to soft skills, for example, writing in general to writing for for research purposes, and then certain skills, for example, reading to other, for example, writing, and earlier language courses to specific subject matters area, for example, engineering, business, and etc. And then the principle of transfer. Here, because the L2 learners naturally seek to transfer existing knowledge or ability to new knowledge or ability efficient and successful learning, will result from a process of making meaningful associations between a learner's existing knowledge, skills, and emotion and the new material to be learned. Next is about reward. Virtually, everything we do is predicted on the anticipation of a reward, whether physical, mental, emotional, or social. Classroom techniques have a much greater chance to success if they are self-rewarding in the perception of the learner. Learners perform the task because it is fun, interesting, useful, or challenging, and only secondarily because they anticipate some cognitive or affective rewards from the teacher. As they teach one skill area, for example, listening, connect what students are learning to other skills such as speaking or reading. Avoid the pitfalls of rote learning. Don't overdo grammar explanations, drills, activities that have no clear purpose, and tasks that are unclearly understood by students. Base your teaching as much as possible on content that learners can identify with, as opposed to the grammar-driven teaching. The implication of intrinsically and extrinsically driven behaviors for the classroom are more complex than they might seem. At one end of the spectrum is the effectiveness of a teacher's praises for correct responses. For example, very good, nice job, and grades or gold stars to indicate success, smiles and affirmation from classmates, and other public recognition. At the, o- at the end, at the other end, students need to see clearly why they are performing something along with its relevance to their long-term goals in learning so that they are not dependent on external rewards. And then the principle of reward is human beings are universally driven to act or behave in anticipation of a reward. The most powerful rewards are those that are intrinsically motivated. The behavior stems from needs, wants, or desires within oneself and is self-rewarding. And then self-regulation. One of the key foundation stones of effective L2 pedagogy today is to create a climate in which learners develop autonomy, the capacity to control one's learning. Today, autonomy is now almost universally manifested in the classroom in the form of allowing learners to do things like setting personal goals, developing awareness of strategic options, initiating oral production, solving problems in small groups, and practicing language with peers. Our language curricula now recognize the cru- crucial goal of helping learners to use the language outside of the classroom. Teachers encourage learners to take charge of their own learning and to chart their own pathways to success. Such self-regulation, of course, means that learners are encouraged to take responsibility for their learning as they develop a battery of strategies for intake, organization, compensation, output, uptake, and social interaction. They are proactive agents in determining their ultimate success. And then briefly, the principle of self-regulation states is mastery of an L2 will depend to a great extent on learners' ability to proactively take charge of their learning agenda, to make deliberate, goal-directed efforts to succeed, and to achieve a degree of autonomy that will enable them to continue their journey to success beyond the classroom and the teacher. And today, the language eco concept is more elegantly refined and expanded into what Norton 2030 and others have described as identity. Identity is the extent to which L2 learners do not perceive themselves merely as individual entities, but more importantly, as an integral and constitutive part of the social world to which they are connected. And even more pregnantly, identity research brings to light the dynamics of power and powerlessness inherent in every learner's journey toward belonging to a community. The completeness of learners' participation in that community is partly predicated on their investment in the long and often winding road to success. While investment involves commitment and motivation in the traditional sense, more importantly, learners are seeking to increase the value of their cultural capital. And with the introduction to the related concept of identity and investment, consider the following summary of the principle. Learning to think, feel, act, and communicate in L2 is a complex social-affective process of perceiving yourself as an integral part of the social community. The process involves self-awareness, investment, agency, and a determination amidst a house of power issues to frame your own identity within the social relationship of a community. Next is interaction. For some time now, L2 researchers have been focusing on a construct known as willingness to communicate, a state of readiness to engage in the L2, the culmination of process that prepare the learner to initiate L2 communication with a specific person at a specific time. Observations of language learners' unwillingness to communicate for many possible reasons, including anxiety, fear, and other affective factors, have led us to emphasize classroom activity that encourage learners to come out of their shells and to engage communicatively in the classroom. McIntyre et al. 2011 also described WTC or willingness to communicate as a socially constructed and dialogue process rather than merely an internal attribute, highlighting the significance of perceived competence, error correction, and subtle features in particular social contexts. And the key communication and ultimately to automatic production and comprehension of the L2 lies in what in 2007 called the interaction hypothesis. Interactive communication is not merely a component of language learning, but rather the very basis for L2 development. Here, principles of awareness, autonomy, and authenticity led the learner into Vygotsky's 1978 zone of proximal development. That is the stage between what learners can do on their own and what can be achieved with the support and guidance of a knowledgeable person or instructor. And the principle of interaction may be stated as follows. Interaction is the best to learning through which learners are engaged both in enhancing their own communicative abilities and in socially constructing their identities through collaboration and negotiation. The primary role of the teacher is to optimally scaffold the learner's development within a community of practice. Language culture. Language and culture are uh, intricately intertwined, and often an alter is so deeply rooted in a culture that is not quickly and easily discerned of or internalized by a learner. Agar 1994 used the term language culture to emphasize the inseparability of language and culture. The lingua in language culture is about discourse, not just about words and sentences. And the culture in language culture is about meanings and that include but go well beyond what the dictionary or grammar over. Culture is a complex dynamic web of customs and mores and rules that involves attitudes, values, norms, and beliefs that are imagined to be shared by a community. Culture parameters include such dimensions as individualism, uh, power, power gender roles, age, time orientation, religion, and the list goes on. And the list goes on. Learning a second culture usually involves some effort to grasp the importance of shared cultural dimensions such as politeness, humor, slang, and dialogue. And here's a statement of the language culture principle. Whenever you teach a language, you also teach a complex system of cultural custom, values, and ways of thinking, feeling, and acting. As learners redefine their identities as they learn an L2, they can be aided by a direct approach to acknowledging cultural differences, an affirmation of learners' struggle, of the value of their home culture, and of their self-worth in potential feelings of powerlessness. And next is agency. The principle of agency is our final principle in the number of reasons. First, it's a superb instance of a concept that is emblematic of the more recent social turn. In SLN research, extending our horizons well beyond psycholinguistic cognitive interactional model that characterize much as the research of the last half of the 20th century. Second, agency provides an ample stockpile of pedagogical implications for the classroom teacher in concrete methodological terms. In simple terms, agency refers to people's ability to make choices, take control, self-regulate, and thereby pursue their goals as individuals, leading potentially to personal or social transformations. And the implication for the L2 classroom are myriad. As you will see in the next chapter, in some ways, agency as a further refinement of hierarchy of needs, which uh, garnered a great deal of attention in educational circles. As learners slowly develop the basic sustaining factors of belongingness and affirmation, they are enabled to reach for the ultimate goal of self-actualization, and the difference between the self-actualization and current social-cultural concept of agency lies in the ongoing role of agency as a means to achieve social transformation. And then briefly stated, the principle of agency can be summed as follows. Agency, which lies at the heart of language learning, is the ability of learners to make choices that control, self-regulate, and thereby pursue their goals as individuals within a cultural context. Teachers are called on to offer appropriate, effective, and pedagogical support in their students' struggle for autonomy, development or identities, and journey towards empowerment. Okay, so that's all about the chapter 4. Thank you for attention and see you.